This has become the scandal of the week. And Aaron, unlike Russiagate, it's based on reality. And that has made it deeply uncomfortable for Donald Trump. I mean, what before we get into any of Trump's statements or any of the statements that came out at TPUSA, which is one of the major gatherings of the conservative youth movement, what do you think? Why do you think Trump is so reluctant to feed his base what he's been promising them for months and months and months? I mean, it's gotten to the point where I don't think this happened this happened after our last stream. Dan Bongino has gone into hiding. He's like in a panic room somewhere in suburban Florida.
Trump's denials are so unconvincing and his behavior is so suspicious, like trashing his own supporters for asking about the Epstein Files, which his own top influencers have been hyping up for years, that I wouldn't blame people for starting to think that Russiagate was real at this point, because but he does look like he has something to hide. And he's using Russiagate to try to deflect. He's saying that the Epstein Files were made up by Democrats, by Joe Biden, when, again, nobody invented the fact that he was tight with Jeffrey Epstein, flew in his plane multiple times. What I think is going on, look, I'm curious to hear your take. The maximalist view is that there's compromising stuff on Trump being blackmailed, and this is tied to foreign intelligence. I suspect it's more along the lines of Trump is he's a known sexual predator. He bragged about it on the Access Hollywood tape. He was caught bragging about it. I suspect that there's compromising stuff on him having to do with Epstein, and that makes sense given that he hung out with them for a long time. Epstein once described them as very, very close. He flew in his plane many times. By the way, he claims not to have flown on the plane when that's just not true. There are logs. Maybe he forgot about it, or which happens with him because he also seems to have some cognitive issues like Biden did. But yeah, what I suspect is there's something compromising on him in line with his own known behavior, and he doesn't want that to come out.
Yeah, that seems to be the most mundane, basic explanation. And I think there are also people close to Trump. I mean, all Epstein's men, people close to Trump who don't want this to come out, who don't want anything to come out about them. Trump has said, it could be fake information or information that implicates people in an unfair way simply because they were on Epstein's call log. There are lies that Trump has already been exposed for telling that are pretty transparent. For example, he said back in 2024 that he was not on Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs. Here's our favorite anti-Epstein conspiracist, Michael Tracy. Trump claimed in a January 2024 Truth Social post that he was never on Epstein's plane, but the files show that the files that Pam Bondi released in February 2025, I guess that was like phase one. Remember when they duped all the hack Trump influencers with binders full of information that had already been released, contained flight logs showing that someone named Donald Trump was aboard Epstein's plane on numerous occasions. There it is. Epstein's plane, as the story goes, and this is what Clinton's people say as well, is that Epstein's plane was always available to famous people and powerful people if when they needed to get somewhere. And he was just a reliable provider of private travel for people who didn't want to travel with the general public. So they wound up getting sort of wrapped up with this sex criminal. But here's, what really is damaging Trump is just the sheer contempt for his own base. And we can see it on display. Sorry, StreamYard has changed. And we can see it on display in not just in his comments, but also in the optics here, which comprises the featured image of this stream. It's Trump on the tarmac with his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnik. Listen to Trump's comments.
Mr. President, I know you've urged people to move on, but I'm curious, why do you think your supporters in particular have been so interested in the Epstein
I
story
don't
and so
understand.
upset about how it's been handled? Why
I
do you
don't
think that is?
understand it. Why they would be so interested. He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what the interest or what the fascination is. I really don't. And the credible information's been given. Don't forget, we went through years of the Mueller witch hunt and all of the different things, the Steele dossier, which was all fake. All that information was fake. But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But
Watch Lutnik react to fake news.
pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information.
So I mean, he's urinating on his own base once again.
That's the thing. Like, even if what he's saying is true, right? That there's nothing to see here, this is all fake, it's all made up by Democrats. Then what's undoubtedly, even if that were the case, what's undoubtedly true is he's throwing his own people under the bus, because the premise for so much MAGA influencer talk and like why they were like the basis for which they were saying we should elect Donald Trump, part of it was once he gets into office, he's going to expose the massive Epstein conspiracy. So he's throwing his own people, including the deputy director of the FBI, Dan Bongino, and many others, totally under the bus.
We have a special guest. Are you ready?
Yes, we're ready.
Anya.
Hey, Anya.
Not that special.
Why is it a problem that Donald Trump is standing next to Howard Lutnik while he's denouncing his base as bad people for asking questions about why the Epstein Files and supposed client list aren't being released?
Howard Lutnik back in 2016 was gaining headlines for being a top Clinton donor. And it's funny, if you look back at the New York Post at the time, they were lamenting the fact on Hillary's behalf that she would hold a fundraiser at Howard Lutnik's townhouse in New York because of the optics. Howard Lutnik shares a wall with Jeffrey Epstein's infamous New York City townhouse, was his direct next door neighbor. And so at the time, Clinton was talked about a lot as tied to Epstein, or, there was a lot of whispering about Bill Clinton having flown on the Lolita Express. And so the New York Post and other media outlets at the time pointed out that Lutnik hosting this fundraiser for Clinton in 2016 right next door to Epstein maybe wasn't the best look. Fast forward almost 10 years later, and Lutnik has switched sides completely. No longer a Clinton supporter, but somehow weaseled his way high up into the Trump camp. And we see this statement from Trump on the heels of his tweet, basically calling his supporters a basket of deplorables. He might as well have said that, saying he doesn't want their support anymore if they're still into the Epstein case. And for Lutnik to be the figure lurking behind Trump in the shadows, really, I would like to see more headlines now saying, what are the optics of that?
There's now a Newsweek story about that since the reaction on social media, which I would credit myself with helping to trigger. I got like 60,000 likes pointing out Lutnik shouldn't have been standing next to Trump at that point. Trump is really losing his touch. This is a Newsweek headline from yesterday. Howard Lutnik's ties to Jeffrey Epstein come under scrutiny. Do they cite me? Probably not. So yeah, it's all boomeranging back on Trump. A former Hillary Clinton supporter now is his wingman, denouncing his own supporters.
A top Clinton donor. And that's what's so crazy about the bait and switch that the Trump administration pulled on this issue, is that if Kamala Harris had won, I don't think we'd be getting Epstein revelations, but I don't think that it would have even been talked about. I don't think you would have had Merrick Garland going on MSNBC all the time and saying that he was looking at the Epstein list on his desk. He wouldn't have had Christopher Wray going on podcasts and saying that he believed, based on what he saw, that Epstein worked for Middle Eastern intelligence. They went so far in their acceptance and discussion of Epstein and the way that the public understood, that for them to just turn around the day before Netanyahu shows up in the U.S. and for them to say that, everything that we possibly, whether it's the idea of a client list, whether it's the fact that there was all that video equipment and videos seized, images seized from Epstein's various properties, people were expecting to see. I know people are always like, what are the files? What are the files? There aren't these files, but the government had an investigation. They ran an investigation, a long-term look at Epstein, and there's mountains of evidence that was collected in all these cases over multiple states against him and Ghislaine Maxwell, that you would assume there are at least government documents, discussions, or something that more than just this memo put forward, which basically says there's nothing. He wasn't working for anyone. There was no blackmail ring. And that was after you had the Attorney General actually claiming that she had a client list on her desk. So something is deeply wrong here. And for Trump to throw, this is not just Epstein, I think, is the straw that broke the camel's back when it comes to Trump's betrayal of his base. But this has basically this is part of the switch toward no war with Iran to bombing Iran to we're going to have peace in Russia to we have more sanctions and confrontation with Russia to we're going to have mass deportations to we're having amnesty for undocumented workers here. That is not what Trump's base voted for. None of that that's like those are the core issues, I think, of what they expected him to deliver on. And so this is part of a wide betrayal. And there's just something about the Epstein case that I think, for obvious reasons, captures the public's attention and is seen as this scandal that had to be resolved because of the way that it involved both parties, so many of our elite, and that it also signaled or suggested that there's something wider going on in the United States when it comes to who's influencing and directing our government. And so I think this will be the end, really, of Trump. There's still like the hardcore Trump people that are just going to, I think, follow him no matter what and trust the system or trust their friends in government. But I think more broadly, especially with young people, they're going to start looking for someone else now to lead the America First movement. I think Trump has pretty much betrayed not just on Epstein, but across the board, whether it's immigration or normal foreign wars, betrayed the very core of the America First ideology. And so I don't see how he can be regarded as the leader anymore.
Aaron, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. There's the whole, go ahead.
Well, I'm not as confident in the MAGA faithful. I don't know. Certainly he has, of course he's betrayed them in so many ways, as Anya just laid out. Especially, for my purposes, the issue I'm most concerned about, which is war. He's been a complete reversal of everything he claimed to stand for. Although you can also go back to his record and find plenty of moments where he loved to brag about how subservient he is to Israel and how he would threaten also Russia with more military might. So he, in his defense, he has been pretty inconsistent. But listen, I hope to see the abandonment of Trump from his faithful. I would love it if that were true, because it'd be great if they were led by someone who actually, at least, even if I don't agree with much of the MAGA agenda, at least enacts what they claim to stand for, especially on the aspects of it that I find positive, like, for example, being against endless war and focusing on domestic needs, which Trump has never done. So I hope that happens. I hope it happens.
It's an important point. Epstein's a stand-in or sort of a catch-all for all of Trump's betrayals in the sense that he's now kind of one of the elites. He's had his chance. This is his second term. This is his comeback after he was persecuted in all of these various cases that are seen as lawfare by his base. And he's not actually turning against the agenda that they voted against. His party, his Republican Party, has become an anti-establishment party for many. He brings in the Bush coalition that went along with the whole war on terror. But as Anya pointed out, the generation that grew up after 9/11 and around that time, the millennials, the Gen Zers that are in Trump's camp, they are fully anti-establishment, do not trust the system, or anti-war. And he owns that, and he baited them through influencers like Dan Bongino and through Pam Bondi into believing something was going to happen here. And now they see Epstein as a bipartisan figure who has compromised Trump and people around him who they may not have been aware of, like Lutnik. And there are so many others.